Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Juliette Goodrich. Here's a look at the four big headlines we're following at 4. Tense moments on Capitol Hill. Protesters interrupt Robert F. Kennedy Jr. while testifying before Congress. Sean Diddy Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie back on the stand talking about this horrific video that you see right here of Diddy beating and dragging her through a hotel. Also, a college student who has lived in the U.S. since she was 4 faces deportation. We hear from the 19-year-old in her first interview while in detention. And it's a dangerous hoax known as pizza doxing. What we know about this strange threat targeting federal judges nationwide. President Trump sits down with Syria's president one day after announcing he will lift all sanctions on the country. Trump says Washington is exploring the possibility of normalizing ties with Damascus. Now, keep in mind, the last time a U.S. president met with his Syrian counterpart was over 2 decades ago. The meeting in Saudi Arabia, just one stop on Trump's 3-stop tour through the Middle East. Today's destination, Qatar. So let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi with more on this. So, Olivia, what do we know about Syria's new leader and also mainly the significance of this meeting?
Well, Jules, it's good to be with you. Quite a notable meeting between the president and the new leader of Syria, Ahmed al-Sharaa. He was formerly a member of al-Qaeda, even a leader of al-Qaeda in Syria. Now, however, though, the U.S. is viewing a reset with that relationship. Trump meeting with him today at the behest and the request of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. They met earlier. It was a brief conversation. We heard from the White House on their readout that there were 5 things Trump wanted to talk to him about: signing onto the Abraham Accords with Israel, which would normalize their relationships, getting foreign terrorists out of Syria, telling or deporting Palestinians that are there that may be associated with Hamas, helping the U.S. to prevent the resurgence of ISIS, and assuming the responsibility for those ISIS detention centers, that are in northwest Syria. So important note there that they had this conversation as they're really viewing a reset of relations not only with Syria but also with Iran. Remember, there are negotiations happening right now between the U.S. and Iranian delegation members about their nuclear program and trying to get them to really reset their relationship with the United States. Take a listen to what Trump had to say specifically about those negotiations and the relationship between the two countries right now.
Because we want to see Iran do well, thrive, be successful, and everybody be happy. I know many Iranians living in New York and Washington, D.C. They're great people, and we want to have this end peacefully, not horribly. So I just want to thank Your Highness for that act of help. We're really helping the region, we're helping the world, we're helping your country. And we'll try and get it done. If we can, we're going to try and get it done. They have to move quickly. And I just hope Iran realizes what a good friend they have right here.
Now, the president says that those negotiations are ongoing, but the window to reach a deal between the U.S. and Iran is closing. So something to watch there, clearly, as that conversation about Iran and their nuclear program overhanging this entire Middle East trip.
Yeah, so 2 more days left in this Middle East tour. So what else will the president be doing?
Well, tomorrow he's going to head to the United Arab Emirates. That's the final stop of this trip. He went to Saudi Arabia, he went to Qatar, now he's heading to the UAE tomorrow. But tomorrow is an interesting day because all eyes are actually going to be on Turkey. We know that President Zelensky will be there, hoping to meet with his Russian counterpart. We have not been given word yet whether or not President Putin of Russia will be at that meeting, but this is expected to be some breakthrough conversation happening between the two sides about ending that 3-year-long war. We know that Secretary Rubio will be heading along with some other members of the United States delegation. We do not know yet if the president will be heading there. He has kind of signaled signaled that he's waiting to see whether or not Putin will be there. So all eyes will really be on Turkey tomorrow as Trump is having these conversations in the UAE. But mind you, this has also been a topic of conversation in each country he has been. It was something he talked about with that Syrian leader, is the Russian war in Ukraine. So a lot of activity in the region that is certainly overhanging these critical conversations that Trump is having with Middle Eastern leaders.
Olivia, thank you. All right, let's turn our eyes now to Wall Street. The closing bell rang just moments ago. Tech stocks continue climbing as some of America's biggest tech companies tout a flurry of artificial intelligence deals, and those deals sealed by CEOs who joined President Trump on his stop in Saudi Arabia yesterday. So let's take a look at our interactive stock market heat map brought to you by FinViz. It is showing the top 500 stocks, and as you can see, tech giants like NVIDIA, Google, and Tesla all landing in the green today. CBS News contributor J.D. Durkin joining us live from the New York Stock Exchange. Hi, J.D. Why don't you walk us through the markets and what happened today?
Jules, good to be with you here as always, my friend. You saw there the heat map. There's a lot of purple on the big board today, and that means, yes, on the one hand, you do have a lot of these big, very splashy pro-growth tech companies, the NVIDIAs, the Teslas, the Googles of the world leading the way. But the fact when you looked at the 500 companies in the S&P 500 and you saw a lot of red, that tells you didn't really see the rotation across the market today. Overall today, I would argue, the market's still very much trying to find its footing and trying to make up its mind. In today's session alone, Jules, we saw the S&P 500 really waffle back and forth, positive territory to negative territory and back and forth. But this all comes at a time when tomorrow morning here on Wall Street, it'll be all eyes on the inflation trend. PPI, Producer Price Index, give us a sense of wholesale state of inflation. Of course, at the same time, we're watching for movements on interest rates out of the central bank. And a few notable companies as of late to follow today. We had one pretty splashy IPO up at the NASDAQ, a competitor to Robinhood called eToro. Gives us a sense that maybe, just maybe, the IPO appetite is picking back up here at Wall Street. That would prove to be a very busy next few months here on the street, Jules.
So, J.D., let's dig in a little bit deeper, and you're certainly good at this. Let's talk about these AI deals secured in Saudi Arabia. Really, we're in some unique territory here, the intersection of big tech and politics. So what are investors saying about these deals?
Yeah, it's really clear from nearly everyone I'm talking to, economists and analysts alike, that this is really a blurring of personal interest, political interest, and quite honestly, business interests for the presidency, the likes of which we haven't seen really in the history, at least modern history, of anyone who's been commander-in-chief. This was a staggering list of CEOs. You had Alex Karp from Palantir, you had Elon Musk, you had Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, Sam Altman of OpenAI, representatives from companies like Amazon and many others, all there in Saudi Arabia for what is otherwise, we can't forget, a political visit. So it's really stunning to me to see these big AI capital expenditure announcements not come during an investor day, not come during an earnings report, but what is supposed to be basically a political visit for the president. In fact, the president's first visit overseas, without a doubt, kind of blurring the lines here between state and self. Safe to say the rule book is out the window on the blending of all these interests at once here, but that does underscore a lot of challenges to the future of these geopolitical relationships. If this investment to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, Jules, if it is tied to political alliances, well, those, as we know, tend to shake out in different ways one year to the next. There could be diplomatic blowbacks or uneven access to deals. Today, the stock movement in NVIDIA, AMD, Supermicro tells us investors heard some of what they wanted to hear, but it certainly still spells out a pretty uncertain path moving forward.
All right, always good information. J.D. Durkin, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fake pizza orders sent to federal judges across the country, the threat that's prompting security concerns next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. To New York now. Sean Diddy Combs' former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, is back on the stand for a second day of testimony in Combs' sex trafficking trial. Ventura began her testimony yesterday describing in graphic detail years of physical and sexual abuse. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman joining us live outside the courthouse with more on the case and also Cassie Ventura today. Katrina.
Hi, great to be with you. There has been some very challenging testimony in that courtroom today. right before I came out to speak with you, Cassie Ventura was testifying about a time after their relationship ended when Sean Combs raped her. They had had dinner in Malibu. He had taken her home to her apartment, and then she says that he raped her on the floor of her apartment despite her saying no. Something that was notable too is that Cassie's husband has been in the courtroom along with his mother and her brother, but there's a reason that he had to be precluded from this. The defense may want to bring him in as a witness. So I had noticed him fumbling with some sunglasses right before this moment, and then they slipped him out of the courtroom as she testified about this very dark turn between her and Sean Combs. We've also learned about other violent instances, both in their relationship and with him and her friends, with his former assistants. She spoke about an incident where he came to her apartment once in LA. She was sleeping at the time, but he ended up attacking a friend of hers who was there that we believe is going to be victim number 2 in this trial. So it's very likely we could hear from her. Supposedly he came in, attacked her. Cassie saw him hanging her friend over the balcony and then throwing her onto patio furniture. She told another story of a time when Sean Combs beat her so badly that she said she didn't look like herself, and he asked her to hide herself away in a hotel. She went to this hotel called the London Hotel, where she says that she was kept for about 7 to 10 days. Combs's security guards, assistants were facilitating this, and the way she was describing it made it sound like she wanted to leave, but she couldn't, which may be going towards a case that the prosecution is trying to make related to the fact that they say that through this alleged criminal enterprise that Sean Combs ran, one of the crimes that was committed was kidnapping, because it sounds from what Cassie Ventura is saying like she didn't have a lot of choice with being there in that instance. So a lot of just very difficult testimony today in court from Cassie Ventura.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an intense case with all due intent purposes. And I understand some of the family, Combs' family, wasn't in the courtroom today. You've been inside the courtroom. What has it been like?
What I was struck by today was the lack of Sean Combs' daughters in court. 6 of his children were there yesterday, including his twins and his other daughter, Chance. The testimony was really graphic, violent, pornographic, and it wasn't that much of a surprise to see that they didn't return, but I do think it's notable. His mother is still in court. His sons are still there. When I watched her during Cassie's testimony about the rape, his mother was just sitting there on the edge of her seat watching this go on. Sean Combs has been looking forward through a lot of this, looking at Cassie, looking at the jury, taking a lot of notes, sort of shifting uncomfortably in his chair. And the jury seems riveted as well. They're taking notes. They are watching Cassie Ventura very closely throughout all of this.
All right. Thank you for your reports and your observations inside the courtroom. Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, thank you. Wisconsin Judge Hannah Dugan will appear in court tomorrow. This comes after a federal grand jury indicted her on charges of concealing a person from arrest and obstruction of proceedings. She's accused of helping an undocumented immigrant evade federal agents. So CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joining us live now. Scott, you've been following this case. What do you expect in the courtroom next?
Yeah, the judge is going to ask this court, the judge in the courthouse behind me, to dismiss the case. She argues that judicial immunity should protect her from this case, not just from being found guilty, but from the case being brought at all. That request submitted this afternoon to the federal judge hearing her case. She's off the bench for now, but it's worth reiterating the allegations here. According to the Department of Justice, the judge was in her courtroom last month when a defendant in her courtroom was being sought outside by immigration agents for possible detention and possible deportation. It's alleged she obstructed those agents, rerouting the defendant away from the agents and out of the courthouse, where he was later taken into custody. Her attorney denies these accusations, says that no crime has been committed. She'll have an opportunity in the courthouse behind me to actually enter her plea several weeks after the allegations were first levied.
So let's talk about something else happening right now. Pizza doxing. We're hearing a number of federal judges are being targeted by pizza doxing, if you can explain that, happening all over the country. So what exactly is going on?
It's a new phrase. It's also a new type of menacing of federal judges nationwide. CBS News has confirmed there have been dozens of incidents of this very strange type, menacing type of doxing, where you use somebody's publicly available home address and information to try to menace them, if not terrorize them. In these cases, people have been sending unsolicited pizzas to the homes of federal judges, and they've been sending the pizzas under the name of the son of Judge Esther Salas of New Jersey. The son of Judge Esther Salas of New Jersey was murdered by a disgruntled person at the judge's doorstep in 2020. The judge told us that this type of harassment is trying to send a chilling message to the judiciary, a violent, threatening message to the judiciary. The U.S. Marshals tell us they are investigating these unsolicited pizza deliveries, which some Homeland Security specialists say can be a first step to further harassment of judges by confirming their home address, confirming there's proof of life in the home to menace them some more.
Absolutely. All right. The man who attempted to assassinate Trump in Florida will be in federal court for motions relating to his upcoming trial. So what did we learn in court today?
Lots of courts, lots of action today, this time in the federal court in southern Florida. Ryan Routh is accused of the September 2024 attempt against President Trump's life. He was the person, according to the feds, who was in the tree line, in the bush line, with a firearm in hand as Trump golfed at his Florida golf course. His case is now set to go to trial in September, nearly a year to the day after the alleged incident. They are arguing today over what evidence should be included, what evidence should be precluded. He's pleaded not guilty, but the bottom line here is this is on a trajectory toward going to trial. And though so much news happens so quickly, it's worth underscoring the significance here. This would be somebody going on trial in America for an attempted assassination of a then former president. Quite a case unveiling there and unraveling in southern Florida.
Appreciate all of the updates. Scott McFarland. Scott, thank you. Torrential rain leaves entire neighborhoods underwater in the East Coast. The evacuation's underway, and the mission to rescue 200 people trapped in an elementary school next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. A college student who has lived in the U.S. since she was 4 years old is facing deportation after being pulled over in a traffic stop. 19-year-old Jimena Arias Cristobal was pulled over under suspicion of making an improper turn. CBS News obtained footage of the traffic stop that led to her detention. While the charges against Arias Cristobal were dismissed, she sits in ICE custody and is facing deportation. CBS News' Camilo Montoya Galvez traveled to Dalton, Georgia to speak to her family about the situation.
Looking at these pictures makes Taita Cristobal emotional. Her daughter came to the U.S. in 2010 when she was 4. Despite being in the U.S. illegally, she had an otherwise typical American upbringing. You're saying your daughter loves the U.S.
Yes.
She really does not know Mexico at all.
No.
But earlier in May, Jimena Arias Cristobal was stopped by a police officer who mistakenly believed she had made an improper turn. The officer soon discovered she was driving without a license.
Have you ever been to jail?
No, sir.
Oh, you're going.
I cannot go to jail. I have my finals next weekend. My family really depends on this.
Her undocumented father was also detained in April, following a traffic stop. They're now being held in an immigration detention center in Lumpkin, Georgia. Jimena's sisters, both American citizens, fear for their mother, who also came to the U.S. illegally.
My family's a good family. They're not criminals. They might have came here illegally, but they came here to fulfill their dreams.
Jimena calls home daily from detention. We were there when she called on Mother's Day.
I think the hardest part is being ripped away from each other.
Even here, in a deep red Georgia district represented by immigration hardliner Marjorie Taylor Greene, the case makes many uneasy. Georgia state lawmaker Casey Carpenter is a Republican who represents Dalton.
There's been an uprising of heartbreak for our community because, a lot of people felt like we were going after the hard criminals, and unfortunately, good people are getting caught in the wash on this issue.
What scares you the most?
Not being able to stay here my whole entire life. My life is here, and I'm scared I'm going to have to start all over again in a country that I don't know.
Despite the dismissed traffic charges against Jimena Arias Cristobal, the Department of Homeland Security said in a statement that the facts in this case have not changed. The department says that she and her father are in this country illegally and they have to face the consequences. Camilo Montoya Galvez, CBS News, New York.
A community in New Orleans is rallying around a young girl who is fighting for her life after being shot in the head during a shootout. Police say 9-year-old Leilani Brooks was playing outside her home Monday afternoon when the family heard gunfire.
She had run upstairs to seek safety with her family, and she was in the process of actually picking up her little sibling. She was holding that little sibling to protect that little sibling when she was shot in the head.
I'm hoping she'll be all right, because the neighborhood wouldn't be the same without her. She's so cheerful, you know, and always got a smile whenever you see her. Very sweet young lady.
Police say the bullet went through a window. Less than 24 hours later, police tracked down and arrested the suspect, 19-year-old Evans Rogers. Parts of the East Coast are underwater after flash floods sparked by heavy rain drenched the region. In Virginia, a 12-year-old boy was swept away by high waters, and officials say Jordan Sims was walking outside when he was taken over by rushing water that had flown into the road from a creek, and it happened outside of Charlottesville. Fire crews say they believe they found his body this morning and have suspended search operations. And then take a look at the devastation in western Maryland, where officials estimate more than 4 inches of rain fell in 24 hours. Homes, businesses, and schools ordered to evacuate. The water rising so fast, search crews rescued about 200 people trapped in an elementary school. All right, let's get more on this. Meteorologist Zoe Mintz joining us on these conditions and just the tragedy and the danger right now.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about before, flooding is the number one cause of deaths when it comes to any sort of storm. Hurricanes, even tornadoes, not nearly as deadly as flooding. So just a reminder, turn around, don't drown. Try to stay inside, try to stay safe, because a lot of rain has fallen over the past 24 to 48 hours. In fact, nearly a foot of rain has fallen across parts of the Appalachian Mountains. Yeah, nearly 12 inches. And that rain is going to continue up the I-95 corridor into our overnight hours. And by early tomorrow morning, most of that activity will already be gone. But all eyes are going to be across the Midwest by tomorrow afternoon and evening, as a line of strong to severe thunderstorms is going to be developing, moving across places like Green Bay, Wisconsin, Chicago, Illinois. Again, this is going to be tomorrow afternoon and evening, where we do have that potential for large hail, damaging winds, and even a few isolated to large tornadoes. So again, tomorrow evening, all eyes are going to be on that severe weather threat. But the only reason that we have the potential for severe weather is because of the heat that's building. The rain is actually cooling things down across the Dakotas, the places that were dealing with near triple-digit heat yesterday, finally beginning to cool down just a little bit. But the heat is still definitely on across the central United States, where places down near Texas are breaking records left and right. San Antonio, 103 right now, and we likely are going to be getting up to 106 this afternoon. If we could take a look behind me, show you those record-breaking high temperatures that we're expecting again from all across Texas, even up to Oklahoma. Upper 90s to triple-digit heat. And that's where we're going to be sending on things over. Let's go to CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca. He's out there live right now in Texas. And Omar, let's talk about this springtime heat wave and how Texans are dealing with it right now. I think might be frozen right now. He's frozen right now, but it's okay. Thank you, Omar. Hopefully we can get back to you, and we'll have more news and weather. That'll be coming up, Jules, right?
Well, absolutely. And where Omar was, that's where the temperatures are just deadly right now, and people need to take those precautions.
Yes, you're definitely going to have to go into those cooling centers. People who unfortunately don't have a place with air conditioning, this is going to be a deadly time period. So stay inside. If you are lucky enough to have air conditioning, keep it high, or keep it as high as you can, while the energy grid is actually not very great right now. So there's all these things to keep in mind. You want the air conditioning, but you don't want to have it too hot.
Yeah, we'll circle back with Omar also. Thank you, Zoe. Appreciate it. Top federal aviation officials testify on Capitol Hill following major problems at one of the busiest airports in the country. What is being done to keep travelers safe? Next. Stay with us. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Let's get straight to CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca live in San Antonio, Texas. Omar, thanks for joining us. You know, just a few minutes ago, your camera actually froze because of the heat. So I think that's important to note because of the conditions there. And you've since then moved into the shade. But tell us about what's going on there.
Yeah, we're trying to stay out of the sun because it is punishing. Really, temperatures are slowly getting into the triple digits here today. And the city is opening up cooling centers, so we want to show you what we're talking about. These aren't your traditional cooling centers that they have, but it's a little bit different here. This is actually the San Antonio Main Public Library. So I'm going to go into my library voice here in a second. But they open this up. This is a 5-story building, and the city opens it up. It's air conditioned. They have water. People can use computers. And they do this because obviously people in San Antonio are used to the heat. Triple digits are not a problem. As we step out over here, you have some of the staff working here, but just around the corner, we don't want to bug them. There are patrons here, and there are people utilizing this library, of course, to cool off. It's obviously in the 70s degree in here. It's very nice. The city tells us that they encourage people to drink a lot of water, stay drinking water, even when you don't think you're thirsty, because hydration can basically stop the ripple effect of bad things that happen if you are dehydrated. And this is just a test at this point right now, because come July and August, you have triple digits all day. And not only that, at night, the coolest may be in the 90s. So folks here are used to it, but this is one of the earliest times they've had this high of triple digits this early. And as a matter of fact, it's probably going to break a record today for a temperature on this Wednesday.
Well, thank goodness for the cooling centers, and thank you for bringing us that report. And stay cool yourself, obviously. All right, Omar, thank you. President Trump sat down with Syria's president earlier today after announcing he will lift all sanctions on the country. The last time a U.S. president met with his Syrian counterpart was over 2 decades ago. So let's bring in CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Keeley with the significance of this post-Assad regime. Hi there.
Hi there, Jules. It is incredibly significant. It's also a wait and see. So let's talk about the significance. We know that Assad left. He was a brutal dictator who ran a bloody and brutal regime. The Syrian civil war left so many dead, so many tortured, and so many impoverished. And then Ahmed al-Shara, this new president of Syria, moved in with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and they were more of a rebel group with former ties to al-Qaeda and more extremist groups. He has since now, as president, shown a more moderate tone even before he took the presidency with his interim government. And now he shook hands with the president of the United States in an effort to start more of a diplomacy, a transactional one for the region as well, engaging countries like Turkey that can help rebuild Syria, lifting American sanctions on Syria, which is major. President Trump also speaks about how he'd like to engage Israel in a Syrian peace talk to actually get them all involved on the Abraham Accords. Now, all of this would be, I'm at a loss for words because it's so momentous and it's happening so quickly. And when I heard that the American sanctions were being lifted on Syria yesterday, all I could think of was the Syrians. And there was huge celebrations in Damascus. They are still trying to dig out of that brutal dictatorship, not just by Bashar al-Assad, but by the previous leader, Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez al-Assad. So will this be a bright new day for Syria? We don't know, but it's a good start with the U.S. president on board, but it's always a wait and see.
Okay, absolutely. Now, 2 days left on this Middle East trip. So one name we saw missing from the itinerary, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So what lies ahead on Trump's trip, and why might he be leaving Netanyahu out of the plans?
Right, so the president is going to the UAE next. So this has been a glitz and glamour tour of the Gulf in what really you could label transactional diplomacy. You give me your plane and I'll take it or not, according to Congress, and we'll give you a contract for Boeing planes. There's a $600 billion deal on the table now with the Saudis, also a $420 billion on the table for an arms deal, the largest arms deal between the Saudi Arabia and the U.S. What we're not hearing is anything about Netanyahu. And here he was today in Qatar. Qatar have been the negotiators for so much in the past, like the Taliban, and they're also the key negotiators with Hamas to broker some kind of peace. And the ceasefire that was brokered before with Steve Witkoff and the previous administration, the Biden administration. So President Trump, before he embarked on this trip, thanked two countries, Qatar and Egypt, for releasing the last remaining American hostage from Gaza. Now you have Prime Minister Netanyahu not on the docket, but he is talking about Israel, saying he'd like to see peace with Syria. Israel has been continuing bombardments and airstrikes throughout last several months inside Syria to establish its own security zone, and they say for its own, to take out military operations and former Assad loyalists. Also, Israel is still bombarding Gaza, something that President Trump clearly is not happy with right now because he's in his deal-making stage, not just transactional in terms of monetary, but transactional in terms of peace. He wants to see the Abraham Accords not only come back into fruition, but bigger and better, the way he likes things. He wants Israel on board, he wants Syria on board, he wants Saudi Arabia on board, he wants all these countries to get along, and as we know, throughout thousands of years of history, that is a pretty hard thing to do. So he comes in peace, and he's leaving Prime Minister Netanyahu out of the equation for now, but we'll have to see what happens next. And I have to say that many of the hostage families are imploring Trump to help them now, and are saying that what Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing is not helpful. We have to see, are there any more negotiations? But right now, in Qatar, where the president is, the talks to get back to a ceasefire, Steve Witkoff's plan, is stalled, with the Israelis not making any movement towards establishing, opening up humanitarian aid, letting anyone in, or establishing peace. And that might be the reason that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not really on the best terms this week, today, with President Trump. We all know President Trump can change his mind very quickly.
Okay, Courtney Keeley. Courtney, thank you. All right, on to the FAA hearing. Officials from the FAA testified before a Senate committee to update lawmakers on the status of implementing new federal safety laws. And this comes as the FAA is under scrutiny following a deadly midair crash near Washington, D.C. earlier this year and recent problems at Newark Liberty International Airport. This includes two 90-second outages where air traffic control had issues communicating with planes. Senators grilled FAA officials about these outages.
During those 90 seconds, was there a significantly heightened danger to the flying public?
I don't believe there was a heightened significant danger to the flying public. But with that being said, from where I sit, we want to remove all risk to the flying public. And that is what's concerning to me, is how do we remove any bit of that risk? And we need to make sure our contingencies are better placed.
So at the same time, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy testified before the House Appropriations Transportation Subcommittee about the Transportation Department budget. He also answered questions about improvements at the Newark Airport. CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joining us live from Capitol Hill. So, Caitlin, what else did Duffy have to say?
Yeah, big day for transportation concerns up here on Capitol Hill. What was notable about Duffy's testimony is that he says there is still a lot of work to do, and this is work that predates the Trump administration, that the infrastructure has been not up to par for quite some time, and that it could take a couple of years to get everything to where it should be. But he also referenced other outages that we really hadn't heard of yet. Take a listen to what he had to say.
There were outages in October and November as well in Newark. So here's what we've done. We had fiber laid at the airports. You can't just deploy it. We want to test it right now. So at the airports, that's being tested today. We're working with Verizon, who have been great partners with us, to get us all fiber going from the airports down to the Philly TRACON from Newark to Philly. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver for you. That was going to be done actually next year, I believe. Then it was going to be done in the fall. Then the summer. I hope to have even better news for you. But we're working at lightning speed and pace to get this resolved.
Now, that testimony had our ears perked up because we obviously knew about the most recent outage, but not those necessarily that he mentioned. The FAA administrator, you played a bit of sound in the beginning in the intro, he said that the outage at Newark was due to a downed line, and the backup line did not go into effect the way that it was supposed to. So you heard him say, the FAA administrator, that the risk to flyers wasn't necessarily heightened, but that anything like that obviously raises concern. Covering these hearings and the ones we had right after that crash at DCA, the obvious questions that have been raised repeatedly are, is it safe to fly? And administrators and officials have been arguing that yes, it is, but these changes need to be made also to ensure confidence in the system.
Yeah, it seems like it can't happen fast enough. We want it to happen overnight, but it is a process. Thank you so much. Caitlin Huey-Burns, appreciate it. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy also testifying before Congress today about budget proposals. Things got heated when protesters interrupted his testimony before the Senate Health Committee. Take a look.
The budget I'm presenting today supports these goals and reflects.
The witness will suspend. The committee will come to order.
CBS News digital reporter Alex Tin joining us live now. So, Alex, let's talk about what happened at the hearing today, some of the key takeaways and your observations.
Yeah, so that's right. There were two hearings with Secretary Kennedy today, one in the morning with the House Appropriations Committee, one in the afternoon with the Senate committee that oversees health issues like the Department of Health and Human Services. And yes, on its face, the hearings were supposed to be about the president's budget request and how they want to fund, the next coming year, his budget wish list essentially for the agencies. But instead, what you heard Kennedy asked about time and time again were a lot of other concerns that especially Democrats have with his leadership of the department, including about the ongoing measles outbreak and his inability to give a strong recommendation. Let's listen to one of those examples from this morning's House hearing.
If you had a child today, would you vaccinate that child for measles?
For measles, probably for measles. What I would say is my opinions about vaccines are irrelevant. I have directed Jay Bhattacharya.
Sure. No, like I said, I don't want to.
So that everybody can make that decision. But I don't want to seem like I'm being evasive.
Yeah.
But I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me.
Right. No, I got that. And I'm not asking you to give them medical advice, but would you vaccinate your child for measles?
If I answer that question directly, that it will seem like I'm giving advice to other people, and I don't want to be doing that. I want people to make.
But that's kind of your jurisdiction because CDC does give advice.
And to be clear, while that clip, we just played was of a Democrat asking Kennedy about his frustration, essentially, with Kennedy's inability to give a strong recommendation for the measles vaccine. And we heard plenty of other Democrats echo the similar frustration they had with Kennedy's inability to recommend vaccines like measles. We also heard some reservations from a handful of Republicans, including the top Senate Health Committee Republican, Senator Bill Cassidy, who earlier, just a few hours ago at their hearing, actually had to correct the record on essentially misinformation said by Kennedy, claiming that the COVID vaccine was the only one that had been tested against a placebo, when in fact many vaccines have been tested against a placebo.
Let's talk about what Kennedy had to say about the reversal of some of the planned layoffs at his department.
Yeah, we knew going into this hearing that a lot of members, Democrats and Republicans, had questions about essentially the fallout from these steep layoffs at his department. We knew that the department itself was working very quickly to try to reverse some of the most politically problematic layoffs. We reported last night, for example, that several teams, as well as the director of the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, they were all reinstated just hours essentially before this hearing today. But we also heard a lot of frustration from members of Congress because one thing Kennedy kept telling them was because of a court order he claimed his attorneys had told him not to get into the details of the ongoing major reorganization at his department. That meant that for a lot of questions that members had or wanted to ask about, why is this being cut? Why is this being changed? Why did you lay off this team? Kennedy often didn't give them a straight answer.
All right, Alex Tin, CBS News digital reporter, thank you. Question: would you climb a monument slathered with about 50 pounds of grease? The historic tradition at the Naval Academy next. California homeowners could soon be paying more on their homeowners insurance. State Farm made a request to increase rates in the wake of the Los Angeles area wildfires. The state insurance commissioner allowed the company to hike home insurance premiums by 17%. Earlier this year, the Eaton and Palisades fires destroyed more than 16,000. Now, the company says the cost has left them in a dire financial situation. If a judge gives the green light, insurance rates will go up as soon as June 1st. All right, let's bring up our TikTok tube. Our CBS News social team has so much great content, including a new study that finds most Americans don't earn enough money to afford the basic costs of living. Let's take a look.
You make enough money to cover basic costs of living? In the U.S., most people don't. That's according to this new report, which looked into whether people can afford daily necessities like food and shelter, but also if they can afford the things typically necessary for work, like transportation, higher education, and childcare. And here's their key takeaway. For the bottom 60% of U.S. households, a minimal quality of life is out of reach. And this is what their data from 2021 to 2023 shows. The cost of affording what amounts to be a basic level of economic stability doubled. Housing and healthcare costs surged. And the amount of savings required to attend an in-state public university soared 122%. All of that while median earnings for the bottom 60% declined during that time span. This is how much it costs to maintain a minimal quality of life based on family size, according to the report. Unfortunately, the makers of the report expect that the gap between what low-income families earn and what they need to afford a minimal cost of living is just going to keep getting wider. Read more on the report and our interview with the chairman of the organization who put it together at cbsnews.com.
Boy, our social team has so much great content like this, so follow us at the handle CBS News. On to United Airlines, it's adding some extra bells and whistles to its new Boeing fleet. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve has a sneak peek.
This is the United Polaris studio. Think of it as an upgraded business class, a suite, if you will. There's an ottoman here if you want a guest, a 27-inch TV. Of course, it lies fully flat. This is an elevated premium product that United is launching. It'll be on some of their longest haul flights starting likely early 2026. And what it speaks to is the continued growth in premium. People who are willing to pony up extra money for a really unique, memorable experience. It's also an effort to better compete with some of the most luxurious airlines around the world. But as part of this cabin makeover, it's not just the most expensive seat on the airplane that's getting a facelift. All of the seats are. The regular business class, that's also getting bigger monitors, some changes to the hard product, if you will, the seats. As you go further back in the plane, everyone is getting bigger monitors and new, better food.
Oh boy, it's the annual Herndon Monument Climb. It took place at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. Every year, Naval Academy freshmen, known as plebes, team up and climb the monument, which is 21 feet tall and slathered in 50 pounds of vegetable shortening to make it harder to climb. The goal is to remove a white Dixie cup hat from the top and replace it with an upperclassman's hat, marking the end of their plebe year. The DNC moves towards redoing the elections of 2 vice chairs. America Decides up next. You're watching CBS News 24/7.